The year was 1905. That was the year Saskatchewan became a province. It was a time of celebration and great optimism. Tens of thousands of immigrants were moving into the province to share in its wealth and future. Civic pride was very much alive in its towns and cities, no more so than in the city of Prince Albert. Located on the banks of the North Saskatchewan River, Prince Albert was, in 1905, far more than a one-horse town. To the north were vast forests. To the south lay the prairies that would soon be known as the breadbasket of the world. It was the perfect setting for what the people of Prince Albert believed would be the greatest city of Western Canada. But as the end of the first decade of the 20th century drew near, the dreams of the fine citizens of Prince Albert remained unrealized. Prince Albert was not an important railway center, nor was it home to many industries. Regina, to the south, had become the capital. Saskatoon had received a provincial university. Prince Albert was not attracting what it thought should be its fair share of the thousands of immigrants who were flooding into Saskatchewan. But the good people of Prince Albert were not ready to give up their dreams of civic greatness just yet. The key to achieving that civic greatness came in the unlikely form of a hydroelectric engineer from Toronto named Charles H. Mitchell. Charles H. Mitchell proposed building a dam and a power generating station near a set of rapids on the North Saskatchewan River, generously named Colle Falls, a couple dozen miles east of Prince Albert.
Once a power plant is established by which cheap electric power in large quantities may become available for manufacturers, it is always the experience that industries are immediately attracted. This should be particularly true of Prince Albert, situate as it is at the northern part of the Great Central Plain, at the edge of the grain-growing country, and the southern edge of the timber and mineral-producing regions. It is expected that various industrial plants will be therefore induced to locate, engaging in such classes of industry as pulp and paper, or smelting and refining, machine shops, foundries and metalworks, elevators, flour and cereals, textile products, and clay products. All of them not only use power in large quantities, but bring in large numbers of skilled workmen to help build up the industrial community. Charles H. Mitchell, 1909.
At last, the dream of civic greatness lay within the grasp of the citizens of Prince Albert. Or so they thought. In 1909, Niagara Falls and Colle Falls seemed to have little in common. But one thing they shared was that engineer named Charles H. Mitchell. Mitchell, who was only 34 years old, had worked with the Ontario Power Company for 4 years at Niagara Falls. Although he was trained as an engineer, his salesmanship may have been his greatest strength. He easily convinced the City Council of Prince Albert that for an investment of $1 million, at least 7,500 kilowatts of electricity could be produced at Colle Falls. It was the kind of news that the city wanted to hear. In fact, the mayor of Prince Albert went so far as to predict that the city might become the leading manufacturer of Western Canada. After all, they had to do something with all that power. It was close to 20 times what the local market was currently using. So, with a population of about 4,500, the city of Prince Albert was about to embark on one of the largest construction projects that Western Canada had seen. Instead of City Council debating over whether the doors to the fire hall stable should have springs, as it had a year earlier, Council would be wrestling with the complex issues of a major hydroelectric development, led by an engineer with very little experience. If Colle Falls was going to lead Prince Albert to the Promised Land, it was likely that many more people would be moving into the city. By early 1912, the city council had enlarged the city's boundaries so that it was just 200 acres shy of the size Toronto had been a year earlier. Mind you, Toronto had a population of 328,000. If you're going to dream, thought the city fathers, you might as well dream big. Now, every time a major project comes along, there are bound to be naysayers. There weren't many in the case of the Colle Falls project, but there was at least one, and his name was H.C. Beatty. H.C. Beatty was the secretary of the Prince Albert Board of Trade and the editor of the Prince Albert Herald. He had a reputation as an exceptionally shrewd, energetic, and thorough man. He found what he thought were some major discrepancies in two of the reports that Mitchell had prepared. Being the thorough man that he was, he wrote Mitchell for clarification. Naturally, City Council didn't take kindly to the idea of someone casting doubt on their project. At a council meeting, they instructed Mitchell to ignore the letter, but the damage was done. Doubts arose about Mitchell's qualifications, so the City Council launched its own investigation. It was ultimately satisfied that Charles H. Mitchell, who had never managed a major construction project in his life, was the right person to be in charge. Beatty, however, was not so easily satisfied and remained an ardent opponent of the dam. He accused the mayor and council of graft, but offered no proof. At a city council meeting in 1909, he accused the mayor of hiding a number of documents and demanded that the mayor resign. As things heated up, the police were called and Beatty was asked to leave. A few days later, Beatty decided to use the justice system himself. He had the mayor and a councillor charged with perjury. The case turned into a farce. Beatty was discredited and soon left Prince Albert and never returned. The way was now cleared for the Colle Falls project to proceed. As with any major project, the participation of other levels of government can help spread the risk. The federal government had shown an interest in making the North Saskatchewan River navigable for steamships. Work at Colle Falls would provide an opportunity for both power creation and navigation. However, city officials were never able to extract a written promise that Canada would share in the cost of the lock that would be needed for navigation. Indeed, the only promise came from the city. It would be required to build a lock that would be adequate to pass the largest boats traveling the river. Clearly, a change in federal policy could easily result in much higher costs for the city. In any event, one thing was clear: the cost of building the dam would be borne entirely by the citizens of Prince Albert. When it came time to open the tenders for the first phase of construction, the City Council found that the costs were up considerably. So, they decided to consult another engineering firm from Toronto. Not much changed except for the delay, which led to even higher costs. Just before work began in the spring of 1912, Mitchell provided a further revision of the estimated costs at a still higher price. Sadly, things would only get worse. Even though work was finally underway, the Toronto firm that had been consulted earlier decided that the dam, as designed, was not large enough to handle a potential flood. So yet another engineer was consulted. The project eventually received a green light, but the costs continued to rise. By September 1912, the construction was once again underway. Each day, a convoy of wagons hauled loads of cement, coal, and steel from Prince Albert, 23 miles away, to the largest construction site the area had ever seen. A visitor described it this way.
There were tons of concrete being dumped by huge running machinery, walls under construction, teams and wagons everywhere, aerial carriages on cable wires across the river, taking 8 tons of material at one time, engines away in the flat excavating earth by the ton, and huge steam diggers placing it in wagons.
By July 1913, everything seemed to be falling into place. The industrial complex that would feed on the cheap power and would propel Prince Albert to untold riches appeared close to a reality. Someone promised to build a huge steel complex, employing 5,000 men within 4 years, and another promised to mill 100 tons of steel a day. Paint manufacturing, woodworking, and the manufacturing of railway cars was also in the works. Indeed, it seemed, Prince Albert's dream was about to become true. Unfortunately, while everything seemed fine on the surface, the reality was the financial situation was going from bad to worse. The project was being financed through the sale of bonds, but the European bond market, where most municipal bonds were sold, was drying up. The overdraft at the bank reached $200,000. A new estimate revealed that the total cost had nearly doubled from the original estimate. Someone also realized that the minimum flow of the river in winter, when the demand for power would be the greatest, was not anywhere close to what the proposal had been based on. Matters finally came to a head when on July 29, 1913, the Imperial Bank of Canada refused an additional loan of $200,000 to the city. In an emergency meeting that afternoon, the City Council decided that all work at Colle Falls would be discontinued. When construction stopped, no one thought the project was dead. Those beliefs proved to be misplaced. Over the course of the next year, various reports brought home the fact that the project was not commercially viable. But there was one last chance. A private company made a proposal to complete the dam. Sadly, the hand of fate was not kind to the city of Prince Albert. The outbreak of World War I put the final nail in the coffin of the Colle Falls project. It would take the city 50 years to retire the debt. Today, the incomplete dam remains in place as a silent reminder of what might have been, or, more likely, what was never meant to be.